In 1987, Secretary of Labor William Brock commissioned Workforce 2000. It was commissioned to look at the emerging population trends within the U.S. as it moved into the 21st century. Language in the report cited that only 15% of the new entrants to the labor force over the next 13 years will be native white males, compared to 47% in that category today. The report warned that if the U.S. wanted to continue to prosper, policymakers would need to do three things. Quote, the first was to maintain the dynamism of an aging workforce. Reconciling the conflicting needs of women, work, and families was the second. The final item was to integrate Black and Hispanic workers fully into the economy. Tonight, we discuss diversity and inclusion. Welcome to the Median Society. Good evening. Tonight, we have author, speaker, and passionate civil rights leader, Allie Braswell. Tonight, we're going to discuss diversity and inclusion and understand the methodologies and ways that it is used in corporate America and nonprofits so that we can better the hiring practices as well as systemic racial practices that have gone on, and we want to decrease them. And we're going to find out ways to actually fix these things with Mr. Braswell tonight. Tonight's moderator is Ken French II. And I want to get started by saying thank you so much for coming to the Median Society once again. We had you a few weeks ago on our preliminary show for the election, and just more than happy to have you here. Ken?
Well, Anthony, it's always a pleasure to join you and be with you. I believe in your work, and you've been at this for quite a while. You know, we won't date ourselves, but we've been at this decades. People can put that together, but you know, the work continues because it's important. And when you're talking in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, you know, the most important insert in that entire phrase is equity, because there is the challenge with the words diversity and inclusion.
Absolutely.
And that's where, you know, tonight, hopefully we'll talk about some of that and share even more. But I'm excited to work with you, be joining Ken on this as well. So all yours, sir, all ears, and hopefully I have the answers.
I'm sure you will.
I just want to sneak in and say hello and welcome, and it's a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Okay.
Very
Thanks.
welcome.
So Allie, what is diversity and inclusion? Is it just a buzzword that many corporate American leaders are using today, but can you explain what it is to our audience?
So diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what it is a very good question. When you think about it, what diversity, equity, and inclusion, when the buzzwords first came out, it was the words that replaced affirmative action, because affirmative action was a mandate by law that went away. And so what organizations were looking to do is, it's a proven fact that the more diverse their organization are, the more competitive and more profitable, and the more engaged they are with the target communities that they serve. So when you think about the terms diversity, equity, and inclusion, equity is the new insert in there, and where organizations are really looking for equitable solutions that help all people advance. You know, you hear the term, a rising tide floats all boats. Well, that was true, but in the world of diversity and inclusion, a lot of times they only looked at certain groups, and then certain groups got left behind, especially when you look at studies like from CTI about being Black in corporate America. A lot of people were conflating the term minority. So then that group that they included were women and all other underrepresented minorities. So when the hiring practice is tended to lean towards hiring women, especially white women, it then said that, yes, we're getting more diverse and we're getting more inclusive. But when you started to peel the onion, what you found out was a lot of organizations had left behind the other underrepresented minorities and were really focused on increasing the equity with women. So when you look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, you really need to understand your data, So it is a data mining. You have to take a look at your organization and really understand what is the makeup of who we are. Second, who do we serve and who are we trying to touch? And with any widget that's trying to be sold or any service that's trying to be provided, you want to make sure that you're touching people not only on a national scale, but on a global scale. So when you look at diversity, equity, and inclusion practices, it's the inclusive solution of looking at the population, but also looking at who's within your organization, who's your target audiences. Then how do you build that sense of belonging? That's the inclusion. How do you make people want to be a part or participate in business with your organization? And then in equity, the analogy I like to use is everybody likes to ride a bicycle. But I am short challenged. So at good old 5'9" if you give me a bicycle for someone who's 6'2", I'm going to have trouble hitting the pedals. The seats are going to have me too high. And then also being a disabled veteran, I have two metal knees. So let's just say one of my other brothers who may not have legs or may have lost their legs as a result of their service, if you put them on that same bicycle, they're not going anywhere. But if we were to equip that person with a hand bike and you were to give me a bicycle that allowed a 5'9" individual, and let's just say also someone who happened to be shorter than me with the right facility, meaning the equitable bike or the equitable solution, we can all go along on that journey and arrive there at the same time. So diversity is looking at and making sure that we serve everyone that's within reach of our products, that we hire and give ample opportunity to everyone. Inclusion is then, once we're there, creating a sense of belonging where people can thrive, because the most creative organizations are the diverse organizations. And then equitably meeting people with solutions that serve everyone. Mm-hmm. Long answer, but hopefully that answers your question.
No, that's what we want. We want our audience to understand exactly what it is to be in the diversity, equity, and inclusion aspect nowadays. So we're now in 2020, and it appears that we've made some strides, yet we still have many higher glass ceilings to break. What can we do?
Well, I think having conversations is most important. Being able to engage, when you talk about in 2020, what can we do? I think we're doing it to a large scale because people are raising their voice and using their First Amendment rights to talk. They can share. We don't have to get violent, or we don't have to, but even protest is using diversity, equity, and inclusion, because we may not be in agreement, but you know what? That was what America was built upon, is that the ability to have a difference of opinion and then find a common ground with each other. So in 2020, I think the time is now to take a look at some of the things that have been raised, systemic racism being one of them. And when people hear that, a lot of people get frustrated or upset and say, well, I'm not racist against anyone. We're not calling out any individual. It's talking about a system that has for years allowed only certain people to build wealth and grow wealth. And when in doing that wealth, it has had a disproportionate effect. For example, if a person is able to build wealth, then that is potentially carried down through generations, and it's called generational wealth. Generational wealth allows people to attend schools. They allow people to go to college. They afford better opportunities for the life that we're going to lead. Mm-hmm. When we have systems that have like redlining that prevented the World War II returning African heritage vet from being able to have the same access to the GI Bill or be able to live in communities where they could build wealth, disproportionately, you saw things change for the African heritage people, and people of color is what the term we like to use now. So it's those things that were put in place that systemically we had to try to find laws to overcome, like affirmative action, where we were saying that, there was a certain number of seats set aside in colleges and in organizations that must be filled. But affirmative action has played out. And now what we're looking at is organizations are genuinely looking at, how do I hire the most diverse talent, because it does make me the most competitive. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there aren't organizations who don't do that, especially at their senior leadership level. So I think that's the effort that you're seeing in 2020, is organizations are really looking at everything from the boardroom to the C-suite to their senior leadership, not just at the entry level, to make sure that they have plans of action that allow them to hire talent at all levels. When you do that, we've seen anywhere from a 70 to 80% increase in competitive advantage over other organizations that don't.
Well, so blacks and women have continued to obtain higher education, especially I would say in the last decade. Absolutely. So, but they're still not afforded the same opportunities. So, what are some steps that when you go into an organization, what are things that you're helping those organizations do to recognize getting the best talent?
Well, when the Braswell Group or I go in, what we're talking about is taking a look at their data. And, from a point of data, you can really make a stand on what's going on. When you look at an organization and if 75% are white male and then less than 20% are female and then less than 15% are of African heritage, that's not an organization that's poised for the future, especially when you're looking at the majority of your workforce that's coming to work now are women and people of color. So in order for people to be attracted to go to your organization, they have to see themselves in the leadership that's represented in the organization. So when we sit down and we talk about that, it's from the boardroom to the C-suite to the senior leaders. We have to have plans that look to hire. And, I think Wells Fargo learned a very valuable lesson when their CEO mistakenly said, well, you can't find talent at that level. Well, I'd ask him, where is he looking? And I think that's where, he has had to backpedal on that, and his diversity folks are working overtime because there are talented young people from all walks of life. I think it's a shame if a woman has to go in and have to hide the fact that she's married because she thinks that she's not going to be given an equitable opportunity because she has a husband and children. Whereas, in pay disparity, I think the Obama administration went a long ways in trying to come up with law that begins to fix that. But law is one thing, practice is another. And we still have a long ways to go. A woman who is just as smart as me should be paid just as equitably as me. A woman who has talent that supersedes my talent should be paid more. It shouldn't be based upon the fact that she's a woman.
I want to circle back to the statement you made about the Wells Fargo CEO. Now, his statement was, there's a very limited pool of black talent to recruit from in corporate America. That was a quote that he had. My question to you is, how do we as minorities get them to remove this theory out of their minds and from within corporate America? What can we do?
Well, I think what we can do is, if we're in corporate America, be upstanders and say to the recruiting and the talent acquisition teams that I'm here and there's 10 more out there like me. But where are you looking? They have to build talent pipelines. Historically, Black colleges and universities have to look to build partnerships with corporate America. I have worked with organizations to where we're looking at establishing internships at historically Black colleges and universities, Latino colleges and universities where there's a heavy population. During my years at Disney actually went all the way to Puerto Rico to find engineers. So it's the mindset of the corporation. If that's the talent that you seek, we should be looking for the best and brightest. And we should be looking, like I said, to have a diverse population in our corporate offices. And so it's by intentionally developing diverse pipelines that allow you to find the talent, because the talent is out there. In 2020, I think it would be hard pressed to say that you couldn't find the talent. It's just, where are you looking? A lot of times we only want to go back to our alma mater. If we just only return to the university we graduated from, well, you should expect to see the same thing. I used to see that happen where there was an organization, I won't mention names, that I work for, you work for, Anthony, that continually went to the SEC and the ACC, to 3 schools, to hire their engineering talent. And then they wonder why the talent looked the same, because you didn't diversify your pipeline. When you diversify your pipeline, that's when you will find that there's other talented individuals out there. And then you got to have a mindset to give them a fair opportunity and also give them the opportunity to grow within the organization.
So a couple of weeks back, 60 Minutes ran a show with a former FBI agents, and they were saying things like, agents say that the culture is not conducive to minorities. during his 21 years at the FBI as a special agent, Eric Johnson, Eric Jackson fought for his fellow black agents every chance he got, eventually rising to the lead, the Bureau of Black Affairs Diversity Committee. I think I gave it all to the FBI, Jackson said. I think that's pretty telling in that field as well, with as far as diversity and inclusion, like it not being able to rise up in that big organization either.
Yeah, I've seen it as well. You know, where if you don't have the pedigree that they're looking for and you don't come from the university that they attended, you tend to get looked over. And I can tell you, it was interesting and telling for me when an executive at Disney saw me as the head of the Central Florida Urban League and saw what we had done in a short few months of turning the organization around and rebuilding its credibility and moving it forward. And she remarked to me, she says, Allie, I can't believe we let you get away. I said, you couldn't see me because you were too busy seeing me. You saw the color of my skin. I didn't have the pedigree from one of the predominantly white institutions, Florida State, Georgia Tech, Auburn, Alabama, that you were so busy seeing me, you couldn't see the talent I possessed. So when I got to step outside of it, I got to really leverage and use my talents. And that's what ends up happening. And that's what I'm concerned with when you look at organizations today is recognize that you got great talent. Use these organizations like what this gentleman tried over his FBI career to grow and develop the talent from within, and then give it the opportunity to move to the positions of leadership. When you do that, people will stay with you for years. When you do that, people will recruit and you become a destination employer to where when young people are coming out of school, because of the interaction with the organization, that's where I want to go to work.
Absolutely. And that goes back to what you had said before, that they're only pulling from a specific pool over and over and over and over again, which that is crazy considering all the talent that we have across the country.
You know, and that's where a lot of people get offended with this two words right here, unconscious bias. Folks, please don't get offended with unconscious bias. Understand it, that every single person that has had a life on this earth has had a journey. And in that, we build up unconscious biases, preferences based upon our life's journey. Sometimes, though, we have to be able to lose those or suppress those behaviors so that we can cast a wider net. It can be as simple as, instead of saying a 4-year degree is required, say 4-year degree plus X number of years experience qualifies a person for that job. And then you end up casting a wider net. And the wider that you cast your net, the better the talent pool. But you also have to work with the hiring managers to build a mindset of not just hiring from the same old place. I talked with a recruiter once. She says, every time I see someone's resume from this company, I hire them. Well, then I think about the other 100 candidates who are just as qualified, who may never ever get the opportunity. Why? Because of the unconscious bias of having hired several people and they'd be successful in the organization. She focused just on one talent pipeline. And there is opportunities there, Ken, that can help people to be able to get in. And then once they're in, let's do the mentoring, let's do the coaching, let's invest in that talent and then grow our talent from within.
Do you ever notice African Americans having a practice of not hiring other African Americans?
I know of where they don't promote. So a little bit from my own history, I had a leader once tell me that I would love to promote you, but I'm worried about what the white people might say if I promote another Black. And my answer to that was, what should it matter if I'm qualified and I'm doing the job and I can do it well? Because my white colleagues don't have that challenge. But that's some of the stigma of having gotten there and then being afraid that if I open the door for someone else, am I viewed as being biased? And I think what you should do is you should look at it from the standpoint of what are the qualifications for the office that you're trying to hire or promote to, and hire the best candidate. And if you need to be intentional about diversifying your team, tell your talent acquisition team, I need a diverse pool of candidates. And then you have to pick the best qualified candidate out of that pool. And if that person is just just happens to have your same gender or your same racial background or your same sexual orientation, so be it. Here's the interesting thing to me is that we never talk about when a straight male hires a straight male.
That's a good point.
But if you had a person from the LGBTQ community promote someone from the LGBT community, immediately people are saying, well, they're trying to take over. No, you found the best qualified candidate.
Yep.
And then, we continue to move it forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm very passionate around that one because I kind of felt that one, but it was great to be able to then go back and have dinner with that leader after I left that organization and for them to say, you know what, I should have promoted you.
Yeah.
Now, how about women not hiring fellow women?
I don't really see that happening a lot
Okay.
because I have to applaud the women for being able to look and have that lens of, I'm not going to be intimidated. I'm going to promote the best candidate. That, has it happened, Kent? I'm sure it has. But when what I have seen is women were beginning to have that solidarity and beginning to look and increasing and helping each other break through the glass ceiling long before. But I think what they've also done a great job of building allies who are men. And I would encourage men that when you see a qualified woman being diminished or her skill set being lessened, be an upstander, not a bystander. Don't allow that conversation to happen. Stand up. And I would extend that to any underrepresented minority category. So if you see an African American, oh, well, they just promoted Allie because he's Black and they're looking for a token. No, stand up and say, no, Allie's qualified. You know what? Let me tell you about his degrees. Let me tell you about his experience. Have you looked at that dude's resume? Be an upstander, not a bystander. Because it's very easy to stand there and hear the conversation and go, yeah, well, poor Allie, he's not going to get that one. Okay, or Anthony going to get passed over on that opportunity. No, let's stand up and that's the equitable thing to do. And that shouldn't matter the gender, the race, or the background. And when we do that, that's when we build that sense of inclusion and that sense of belonging where people want to stay with an organization.
Now, I have a quick question. How big of a role would transparency in companies' hiring practices play in having more diversity and inclusion?
Well, I think it plays a huge part in helping to make sure that you're authentic. When you're looking, again, like I said, when I go into work with an organization, the first thing we do is we look at the data because the data will tell you the truth. When you walk into an organization and they say we're 52% diverse, but when you really peel that onion, no, you're like 37% female, and then your other categories are less than 10%. You then have something to build a game plan on. But until you're willing to take a look at yourself and be transparent to your leaders, because the EEO data is going to report and tell the truth anyway. You have to report that, annually. But when you look at it in terms of an organization, especially an HR organization, talent acquisition, it then allows you to have your talent acquisition team concentrate on the areas that you want to see marked improvement. Then you can actually set annual goals that can be measured and see how well you do. That if, you need to grow underrepresented minority talent in your organization. And when I say underrepresented minority talent, I'm talking from women to LGBTQ, African heritage, Latinx, whatever dimension of diversion, Asian, you should look at it and be able to measure and see where you are. Then look for the opportunities to increase that. And that's where we work, how do you go out and build a diverse workforce pipeline? Well, you got to start looking where people are. So if you're short in one category, then maybe that's where you also make sure that you have another way of identifying candidates to come in than the traditional ways that you have been doing. And then secondly, Ken, I would say you have to also go in and train the hiring managers, because you can build the most diverse talent pool in the world. But if the hiring managers are stuck looking for the same person, the same thing. I saw a cartoon once where the candidate was talking to the candidate across the desk and says, "You're exactly who I'm looking for." And it was a mirror that he was looking at.
There seems in corporate America, there has always seemed to be a sort of prejudice amongst the two. And how do we balance and train out the prejudice between a trade-based education as opposed to a four-year education employee?
Wow, that sounds like the $64,000 question there, Anthony. I would say that, the key thing is to look at the skill sets and do job analysis. And when I talk about that, when you post a position or you look at a position, a lot of times we end up going to that wonderful platform called Indeed, and we cut and paste the job description. Mm-hmm. I think the organizations who have the organizational development staff members who can come in and do a job analysis, what is the job that needs to be done? And then process that to understand then what are the skills that you need to do that job? And then can those skills not only come from a higher learning institution, but also a technical institution? Then you write the job description so that you have the ability to pull from both pools if that particular job requires that. Now, there are jobs that are going to require 4-year or higher degrees because of the level of management and the business acumen that you're looking to fill. But if you take the time to do that job analysis, to really understand what is it the job that we're trying to get done, and then what are the skills that are required in order to do that job, that's some of the way that you overcome the technical versus the traditional educational routes of 2- and 4-year colleges. I think also when you do that, you better equip the recruiters to go out looking for the talent that you're trying to see. The last thing is I'm probably gonna sound like a broken record, is you also have to overcome the unconscious bias of the recruiters and the hiring managers and the organization to say, well, I got to have a 4-year degree. Well, that was really interesting to me because I was up for a C-level job and I didn't have a degree at all, but I had the skills. But the inhibitor to me was the piece of paper hanging on the wall. So I went back and got the degree so that could never happen to me again. But wasn't that interesting that you might have missed a stellar talent because of the rigidity of you got to have a 4-year degree? And that's why I think a lot of times, instead of cutting and pasting and creating a job description or using the electronic tools or just clicking on a button that fills in a job description, really to take that step and use the OD department to really look at jobs and say, do we have it properly classified? Mm-hmm. Do we have it? Are we sourcing from the right providers to get it done? Have we really assessed all the skills that it takes to do it and where you might acquire those skills? Because, wouldn't it be great to get a person that's got 12 years experience doing the job over somebody who's got a 4-year degree that has never done the job?
That's a good point.
Absolutely.
It's interesting because if you go to USA Jobs, I know you brought up Indeed, but when you go to USA Jobs, some of their back end to their system, if you don't have certain words or in your resume, it'll just kick your resume out. Mm-hmm. And I've heard that from a number of different people. So how do we create a new paradigm for vocational training in the U.S.? Take technology, all right? A field that has a variety of areas, and many of them don't really need a 4-year degree. However, they're high-paying jobs. So how do we do that when you take a person that's probably here in Virginia and they might work in a coal mine? Some of them are high-paying jobs, but they still have a certain amount of prejudice because those people might not have the 4-year degree. So how do we shift the thinking?
Well, you know what, that's a tough question that I have the total answer to, but I think the first thing is to understand, again, what is the job that we're trying to hire for and who might have the tools. I think in the information technology world, they did that with certifications. Mm-hmm. They really equaled the playing field by Cisco, for example, coming up with the different levels of certification around their devices. Mm-hmm. Because you did not necessarily have to have the degree, you had to have the certification.
This is true.
I think that's the same thing that we're also seeing when people are going back and retooling themselves right now around cyber security. Mm-hmm. You can go out and get certified as a cyber security expert, but it does not necessarily require you to have the degree to be able to get in and get into that school, to get that technical boot camp or that training. I love what they're doing with boot camps around programming. you know, where young people are finding ways to find the dollars and leverage that to be able to go in, because you still got to have those base level programmers, especially given the proclivity for us to use AI tools in everything, you know, from the financial inclusion side of things, using AI to help qualify people off of different dimensions than the traditional metrics that have always used to qualify people for loans, has often ended up not being directly proportional when it comes to race and gender.
Oh yeah.
So using AI tools and other metrics, they are actually now trying to level that playing field. Well, if you are an AI programmer, I'm telling you, if you are a certified AI programmer, they will probably look past the degree because they want the talent. And I think that's where information technology has gone a long ways. So if information technology can do that, how can we do that around other skill sets? You know, there are some that are going to require the traditional education, and that you need to go to school for 2 to 4 years at higher learning. But I think I was really blown away when I went to a distance surgical site, and only to find out the people setting up the surgery only had an AA degree, but they were making $80,000, $90,000 each. And the surgeon was on the West Coast getting ready to perform the surgery, but the people who set up all the surgical equipment, the technicians, were AA degree people out of Valencia. So education will always be something that I'll encourage people to get. Okay. But there are different ways to get there than just the traditional college. I think technical schools play an important part of providing specific skill sets. And I mean, if you don't believe that, call a plumber and ask him to come to your house.
Oh yeah.
And if you get out of there less than $350 for that visit, you did really well.
Yeah. Trade. A trade is
and he didn't cheat you, but you paid for his particular skill set that he went to a technical school to learn, and then he has turned that into a business. So I think we have opportunity, especially coming out of this economic cycle that we're going to go through, for people to leverage technical school, return to some of the trades in order to be able to build and sustain businesses that would help take us forward. Because, you know, we may only think about the high tech and STEM related jobs, but we can't put away a glass without a cabinet. We won't walk in on a floor without the proper wood flooring or that a carpenter helps to do. And we can't, you know, without skilled labor in the building trades, we wouldn't have homes. So I think those are things for people to look at as we retool ourselves and we move forward in 2021.
Absolutely. Well, we definitely learned a lot tonight, and I know that the viewers and new viewers and current viewers of the Media and Society have learned a great deal. Thank you so much for coming on this episode, and we only hope that you come back again, because you have a lot of knowledge, a wealth of knowledge that I'm sure we could learn more from. Throughout all that you've spoken about this evening, what do you want guests to walk away understanding holistically about diversity and inclusion?
I would like guests to walk away, Anthony, knowing that we're all in this together. The only way that diversity, equity, and inclusion works is that we all buy into it. It's not a concept that's fleeting with just because of the civil unrest that is occurring in our nation and across the globe. It's because it's the right thing to do. And when we have found that we do the right things by hiring people based upon their skills and their abilities, rather than causing them not to be hired because of the color of their skin or their gender or their orientation, it hasn't allowed for the best outcomes. And I think when people can take that down even to supplier diversity, to who we do business with, to who we choose to engage with, it will create a better society. It will create a sharing of the wealth in this world that is vast, and it will help us rebuild faster. And so diversity, equity, and inclusion are not just buzzwords. They truly are a movement for the future of our country and of our global world, you know, because the DE&I is global, it's not just local.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there anything that you would like to promote going forward?
If you're looking for a keynote speaker or someone to come in and guest host or just to be a consultant, don't hesitate to call the Braswell Group. You know, Well, if you look me up on LinkedIn, you'll know I'll have a permanent gig, but I'll never stop speaking and advocating on behalf of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and upon civil rights and just people doing good, and because that's what I believe, service is the price we pay to be upon this earth, and that's the way I get to serve and give back.
Okay. Thank you so much, Allie. And once again, thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Media and Society.
Thanks for having me.